Good morning and welcome to another Blood Red Morning Bulletin. And it's a big question being tackled today with myself and Ben Bocsak. We're writers on Liverpool.com. Be sure to check out Liverpool.com where we've got two pieces sort of around this dilemma that have gone up this morning. But to get to the point, the big question is this: who should play in attack against Manchester City? It's amazing it's even a dilemma in some senses. You know, a couple of years ago, there would have been no questions about who would be forming that triumvirate in what is undoubtedly the biggest game of the season. But Ben, there's a lot of players making their case recently, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's looking at that. There's five options really. It's hard to choose which one you would go with. Like they all have a perfect case to make in terms of, being someone who could cause City problems, and I think that's Klopp's advantage really, because even if he maybe starts the wrong starting 11, he will have the chance to redeem himself and bring players on. And it's not going to be over until it's over for Liverpool, because there's game changers bound to be on the bench regardless of what happens, unless there is an injury crisis or something. But with a few days left to go now, touching wood, hopefully that should not be the case. It's exciting times, and I think even someone like Luis Diaz, who maybe probably didn't have a case starting against Manchester City, considering he's the newest, freshest member of that front five. After that performance against Benfica, you can't drop him, surely.
Yeah, we'll dive into the specifics of that soon and who you can and can't drop. But just briefly, firstly, do you think it's an extra advantage for Klopp that Guardiola will have no idea who he's going to play in terms of how he's going to prepare for that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, Guardiola tends to overthink these situations, doesn't he? He's done it in the Champions League final when he picked a strange 11. And maybe potentially he'll overthink this one as well. He'll think of some crazy way to tackle Liverpool, and it might hopefully backfire for him, as it has done a couple of times when he's overthought these sort of big games. But preparing against Liverpool right now as an opposition manager is difficult alone. I mean, you look at the extensive planning Benfica did to stop Liverpool. From I think Grimaldo said he watched hours of Mohamed Salah, and I don't think even though Salah didn't score, Salah got plenty of opportunities. So I don't think Grimaldo quite stopped him. And then I think Benfica's sort of team also asked for advice from Wolves, and in terms of how to prepare for Liverpool, like what Liverpool's secret is. But I think Liverpool's secret is that there's world-class talent, and you can't do anything to stop Trent Alexander-Arnold spraying those balls and creating opportunities out of nowhere. When you also have likes of Thiago on the pitch, it's just hard to prepare against Liverpool in general.
Yeah, that's for sure. And we know what Guardiola thinks of Thiago when he moved to Bayern Munich. Of course, he said Thiago or nothing when he was trying to sort his recruitment. So yeah, there's definitely threats further back in the pitch as well. But it's that front three which is really causing a sort of nice headache for Klopp. You'd imagine it's two spaces that are up for grabs, right? You'd have to think Mohamed Salah is a shoo-in, even if his form has been maybe a little bit off the boil of late.
Yeah, I mean, I think in another morning podcast we were talking about, maybe Salah is just saving that one special moment for City. He's done it earlier in the season, so I think you can't really drop him. He's still the top goal scorer by far and away in the league, and by far away and away at Liverpool as well. And the common adage, as they always say, form is temporary and class is permanent. And at this point, considering the fact that he had a bit of a rest against Benfica, he came off early against Watford as well. You'd think he'd be fresh and fit enough to start against Manchester City.
Okay, so that moves us into kind of the middle of the park, the what would traditionally have been the Firmino role, and Firmino has sort of been building up a bit of a case in recent weeks, certainly compared to where he was a couple of months ago, even. But it's it's a three-way battle, isn't it? Really, you've got Firmino there, you've got Jota there, and recently you've got Sadio Mane, who's emerged as this kind of elite option through the middle.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, the stats speak for Mane themselves. I think he started 6 games through the middle, and he has 5 goals and 1 assist. So that's basically a goal contribution every game. And I think when you break up the numbers based on the minutes he's played, it's even better. So you can't really, like, at the moment, Mane has been incredible in terms of his form. Unprecedented almost. I think he scored 40% of his goals in 2022 for Liverpool this season. So that's almost half already. And we're only in the early part of April. There's still lots of games to go, hopefully, for Liverpool. There's a few more in the semi-final and then in the final as well of the Champions League.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty compelling case.
But I think I wouldn't be surprised if 2 of those players start. I wouldn't be surprised if Klopp went for something crazy and put Firmino in the middle. I could see that working against City. I mean, don't take my word on it. They'll probably play it safe with the midfield, but I wouldn't be surprised to see, depending on how the game is going for Liverpool, to see Firmino come on in the midfield position and see 4 of that Liverpool attack on the pitch at the same time at some point against Manchester City.
I mean, there is some sort of precedent for that, isn't there? Klopp played an hour with a kind of front 4 against City. Was it last season? And it's sort of worked to some extent. It wasn't necessarily as exciting and attacking as we kind of thought it would be when we saw the lineup, but it did work in almost nullifying City's build-up play, and that is really what Firmino brings to the table. He disrupts rhythms. We know how good he is, how smart he is at pressing, and those strengths have been on display recently when he's played. So it's almost that kind of traditional effect. But yes, certainly it would be a surprise if Klopp went with something other than that 4-3-3 from the off. But it's certainly a possibility. But potentially a cop out in terms of the discussion. We can't just shoehorn all 5 of them in. But we'll move on to the left, where you can certainly only play on one left winger. So let's assume that Klopp has made his choice in the middle, with Mane occupying either that one middle slot or, in your alternative system, maybe one of those 2 middle slots. So that leaves Jota and Diaz, I believe, gunning it out for that left wing berth. So you hinted earlier that you can't drop Diaz. Does that mean you think Jota's going to have to settle for a place on the bench?
Well, I think I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, who has made the most impact from the bench at Liverpool? I mean, obviously, Diaz has a very small sample. I think he's only come off the bench once or twice, maybe, for Liverpool. I can only remember his debut against Cardiff and maybe another time, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But then you look at Jota, and he was kind of, since he's arrived at Liverpool, he's almost been dubbed as a super sub. Same with Firmino as well. They're the 2. I think Firmino has scored more goals coming off the bench this season for Liverpool than he has scored starting. So for me, those 2 would be sitting on the bench, ready to come on and make an impact. And at this form, and considering the fact that Diaz has that unpredictability about him, since City won't be too familiar with his quality, although I think he did impress against them a couple of seasons ago when he played for Porto against City, so some of them might know him, but Benfica were very familiar with him. He played against them 7 times and they couldn't stop him. So I think for me, at the moment, it has to be Diaz on that left wing. He's the most effective when he plays there, and he might have played the full 90, but I still think he'll be fresh enough to start.
Yeah, Diaz scored a stunning goal against Manchester City in that Champions League meeting. Of course, Liverpool wouldn't mind a repeat of that. I am inclined to agree with you. I do think that Diaz probably has to start, like you say, that sort of familiarity aspect. It's just the benefit that Liverpool have seen from him ever since he came in. Really, he just provided something different. That kind of live wire, any kind of predictability that was seeping into the attack is no longer there. I think he does have a convincing case. If it was up to me and I had to pick now, I think, I would be going Diaz, Salah, and then through the middle is so tricky. It's so tricky. I think you're probably right. It's hard to drop Mane, but Klopp will know about the specific demands of this Man City game so well, and I do feel that he might go for Firmino. You go back to the Chelsea game towards the start of the season when Firmino hadn't really played up until that point. In the end, he ended up going off injured, so we didn't actually see that much of him. But it was notable that Klopp threw him in from the start. These kind of big games where he's up against managers who like to sort of dominate, who like to dictate the rhythm. He knows how valuable Firmino is in disrupting that. So I might even end up leaving Mane to the bench, but it's such a tough call. And like you say, the main strength for Liverpool is that anyone who plays has the potential to have an amazing game and impact proceedings. My piece that came out this morning was saying that there's even a case for the traditional front three, Salah, Mane, Firmino. That would be a nice kind of last ride for them. And, Guardiola said that he's scared of them before, and I'm sure he'd be scared of them again. So just before we go, just quickly recap for us who you're playing if you're the manager and you're picking today.
I'd go with the same front three that started against Benfica. It seemed to work well for Liverpool recently. So, and like I said, Firmino and Jota are very good at making an impact from the bench and changing the game if necessary. So, for me, that's why it's not because I don't think they're good enough or they don't have the quality. I think it's just because they're just better at making an impact from the bench.
Well, one thing's for sure, Klopp has never had better attacking options than this, probably at any of his clubs. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of discussion when the team eventually does come out. But ultimately, Liverpool are blessed with 5 attackers who can make a decisive difference. And we'll be hoping they do that against Manchester City. We'll be back tomorrow morning with another morning bulletin. Thank you very much for tuning in. And be sure to check out those pieces I mentioned on Liverpool.com and all of the rest of our content throughout the day. Thanks a lot.